All right, so here we go. Let's run through the deck. I tried to have a little fun with this, and we'll get to you folks in a minute. I would hope that there are some questions. You've already provided me with some questions, and I'll roll over to that eventually. And Greg, you said I have to stop by 10 o'clock. Is that correct?
10 o'clock tomorrow morning, yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay. Fabulous. All right. So here's kind of what I've lined up for today. Let's talk about what you guys want to get, and I will do my best to adjust immediately and accommodate. And then we'll go over, and again, all of this is my opinion. What's a job task analysis? Why do we do it? How do we do it? And then what? So throughout the course of the conversation, I hope that none of you are afraid to come at me with any questions that you feel a level of interest about. And I will attempt to be brief, on target, and hopefully actionable in terms of how I respond. And just as a prelude, and this is probably something I should put on every presentation I ever give, is the asterisk with the note at the bottom. So as I get closer and closer to the end of my professional career, I take more and more liberties in certain environments. And that's really where the fun is. So here's my first question to whoever's on the presentation is, what do you people want from me tonight, besides the questions that you sent me? Anything else in particular that I can note down and hopefully address at some point during our conversation?
Feel free to chime in, folks.
I'm curious to know what excites you about tasks analysis.
I'll tell you, and I enjoy doing this work. And I enjoy doing this work because by the time I'm finished, whoever I've been interviewing to document their work processes or work tasks, they know more about what they do than they did at the beginning of the session. And I know more about what they do than anyone else in the organization besides the person I'm talking to.
That's a good answer.
Thank you. I strive to have nothing but good answers and nothing but insightful questions. Those are my targets.
Mick, do people get nervous when they meet with you? Do some think like their job's on the line or something?
It depends on how the project's been set up. But after, I don't know, 10 to 20 minutes, I'm just digging into the topic of what we're talking about. And whoever I'm interviewing, I at least appear to them that for the duration of our time together, there's nothing more important or fascinating to me than what they have to tell me. And I found that apprehension dissipates rapidly.
Okay.
Now, since I do actually enjoy doing this work and getting into it, I have a few techniques besides just being exceptionally comfortable doing this stuff to not only put folks at ease, but I think get them to tell me things that they wouldn't tell the average person. For anybody who wants to go look at my LinkedIn profile, there is, in one of the recommendations written by a guy named Brian, a description of a session I ran one time with a bunch of sales managers, regional sales managers from across the country for a pharmaceutical device manufacturing and selling organization. And shortly after getting the conversation started, I had people telling me in unison that the new sales management system that they'd spent millions of dollars building, these people told their people, the salespeople, to not use the system, which was kind of weird that they told me that, but they did. So anyway, if you can get people to complain about stuff, they're going to be honest and they're going to tell you things.
Mick, thank you. People are chatting in responses to your question, so I'm not sure if you're looking at the chat. I could read it out to you if you'd wish, or however you want to handle it.
Hold on. Let me open that up. And I see audience view. I see sharing, webcam, audio, chat. Okay, there we go. Let me go back and scroll through these. Okay, there's Karen, there's Rebecca. Please remember to start the recording. I thought the due date was August 15th.
It's basically the ones that come in at 6:41.
Okay. I always like hearing how other folks do job analysis. I feel like I tend to skip a lot of steps. Well, I'm going to give you more steps than you'll be able to accomplish by the time we're done here. Where do I do job task analysis? I have done job task analysis as an internal training person in a commercial bank, in various operations departments, as well as out in the branch network, mostly the customer service reps at the branch. I've done this in the data center that supports the Federal Reserve Bank. I've done this at car dealerships. I've done this in an organization that builds and operates sales program tracking systems where prizes are awarded based on sales results. I've done this in a financial services organization that's headquartered in Baltimore. I've done this for a shipping port on the West Coast and a variety of other places. And I don't really care what the job is. I can do a job task analysis on it because it's a generic approach. So I think that runs out the chat. Anyone else have any questions or things I'd like to put on the table before I start executing the planned part of the event? I will tell you that I went back into my archives and I have a backup drive that has over 20 years worth of work on it. And because at some point back in the 90s, when ASTD used to do a technical training national conference, I gave a presentation with the same title, and I was trying to find that deck, but I couldn't. I did find some other PowerPoint decks that were so old that the message was, this is so old, we can't convert it. So much for keeping records of things. So, all right, let's push on, and I have the chat window open. So if anybody wants to jump in there, that's fine. So So let's break down job task analysis. We got you got your job here, you got your task, and you got your analysis. So jobs frequently have job titles, and those things come from our friends in human resources, and sometimes they're meaningful and sometimes they're not. Typically, when I'm asked to go look at a group of people or a department, what I want to start with is the org chart of who reports to whom within the entirety of the organization that I'm being asked to analyze for whatever purpose. And then I'll pick some people and maybe have some preliminary conversations to make sure that I've got a reasonable sample of the breadth of individuals who perform the work that's within consideration. So then next to title, it's often just work, because there may be people with different titles who do the same work, and there may be people with equal titles who do different work. And that's a fun thing to find out. So my general take and experience on job descriptions from human resources is, if you'd ever like to have a list of activities that a person does not perform, go to HR and get their job description. And that's just my experience as it's been. So next to the job, then we have the task. And a task is a verb that ideally has some subject to it. And we're going to flesh this out a little bit as we go through. But any particular task may very well be meaningfully decomposed into subtasks based on the complexity and the need of what you're doing. And any of those subtasks may be further broken down into subtasks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, until you get to the very bottom, which means there's no real way to divine any more detail out of it, such as press enter. When you start hearing stuff like that, you're at the bottom of it. So, and how you record all of these things, I used to have a piece of software that I used. It was a business process re-engineering software, and I don't even know if it's available anymore today. And I don't do a lot of this these days lately. So if I were to do this now, it would be more manual, and I'd probably throw it up somehow into a spreadsheet so I could try to do some sorting of what we're gathering. And then finally, analysis. So, you know, a job task analysis, it's one thing to gather what somebody does in some level of detail, but that's not job task analysis. That's job task documentation. That's the capturing and the documentation and the presentation of the current reality of what somebody or some people do. The analysis part, it's like, okay, so I'm analyzing this for what purpose or against what? So now I know what this person or these people do. So the options I came up with, well, I can analyze it against itself, meaning I can take the job task documentation I got from person A, and I can compare that or analyze it against the job tasks documentation that I got from person B, who purports to be the same type of person doing the same kind of work. And specifically, I'm going to mention that application in a little bit. Another analysis you can do is you can analyze what you've captured against some type of a standard for a job position to see to what degree does the reality on the floor match or not match things such as what we have in human resources, or some type of a job description or set of tasks off of a database like OPM, Office of Personnel Management, which is a federal agency. that publishes in a massive number of job titles and descriptions and possible salary information, or some other type of a salary database. Or you may be analyzing the current sets of tasks that people do against a future direction of an organization to see the people that are working today, are they in a good position to be the people we need to be doing work in the future? And then we can do it relative to some perceived problem. So as a performance consultant or as a business process re-engineer, I've been sent into a team or a department or a group, and I have been told that the performance of this group is deficient. Go find out what's wrong with the people. And I have a whole other presentation about that, where basically I say, well, what's wrong with the people isn't the people. You're the problem because you're the leader, and all problems start with you. But I don't do that anymore, because then I never get the work, and then I have to go live under a bridge and be homeless. And that's annoying. So I don't do that. But as part of some type of gaining an understanding of to what degree does the work and do the workers have opportunities for change and improvement relative to what any perceived problem might be in a work environment. All right, any questions, reactions, comments at this point? Here's my watch. I only have to burn another 34 minutes. So, okay, thank you, Melody. Okay, so this is a slide I actually put together this morning. I've never presented this slide before. So let me ask you via comments. Are any folks on this presentation today familiar with an author named Thomas Gilbert and his book, Human Competence, Engineering Worthy Performance? Anyone ever hear of this? Okay. All right. So, yes, it is hard to read, because besides being great at what he wrote, he was an alcoholic and thought he was a poet at the same time, and tried to manifest all of that in a single piece of work. So Thomas Gilbert and this book, Engineering Human Competence, is the underlying foundation of the standard for performance consulting and the professional organization ISPI, the International Society for Performance Improvement, which is kind of like ATD, but they don't narrow themselves to training. And most of the people in the organization have master's degrees, so they're a little bit snooty and bougie if you go to their conferences. So, but what Gilbert essentially said is, give me a group of performers who all have the same responsibility. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask to perform a job task analysis on 1, 2, or 3 individuals who are recognized as average performers. And I'm then going to do a job task analysis on 1, 2, or 3 individuals who are recognized as high-level performers. And what I'm going to find is the average performers are going to tell me about the 10 things that they do that make up the bulk of their job. I do this, I do this, I do this, blah, 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 blah. And there's whatever number, there's 10 of them. And then I'm going to go talk to the recognized high-level performers. And they're going to tell me the 10 things that they do. And what I'm going to find is that across both groups, there are 8 things that everybody does. And there are one or two things that the high-level performers do that the average performers don't do. And there are one or two things that the average performers do that the high-level performers do not do. And the purpose of this is to identify those 4 tasks or actions or behaviors or whatever they are. And what happens when we do that is the normal curve, and you see 2 normal curves here. So the curve on the left is the one that we started with. And out of that curve, the blue tasks that are performed by the average performer, those average performers were right in the middle of that curve. And the high-level performers were over to the right of that curve. And now we have discovered the difference between an average performer and a high-level performer. And if we can take all of the average performers and tell them, stop doing these 2 things over here and start doing these 2 things over here, then we will turn the average performers into high-level performers. And the entire curve shifts over to the right. And all of that new area that's in pink, if we quantify it, would be the quantified improvement of what we've done to the organization. And the reason it stays a bell curve is because high performers are high performers. And if all of a sudden everybody's doing what they're doing, they will find a way to turn themselves into high performers again. And we could repeat the process after time. And so I just saved you dozens of painful hours trying to get through Gilbert's book. So you're welcome. All right, let me go back up here because somebody sent me a paragraph. And okay, can you give us an example of something that a high performer does in a past project? Okay, so here's what happens. Let me see if I can pull an example. So, all right, I should have had one of these laying around. Okay, so let's take a recruiter. Because I did some work for a large recruiting organization that is headquartered just south of Baltimore. Some of you may be familiar with this. And did work with the salespeople, who are the ones who go find the vacancies, and the recruiters, the ones who fill the vacancies with candidates. Okay? And let's imagine there's a task that the high-level salespeople did that the average performers did not do. And it would be over the course of the week, they would physically visit on site a couple of on a client site, a couple of the individuals that they placed and who were working there, and they would specifically inquire as to, hey, you aware of any vacancies coming up that I might want to fill here? As a source. So the activity was to look for vacancies or look for opportunities. And one of the ways they did that, which I guess you could call it a subtask, was to ask existing placed staff within existing client organizations. Because they're there and they're on the ground. And after a period of time, you know, they get absorbed into the fabric of the organization and they hear things and they learn things and they're involved in side conversations, or they're out in the smoking area, which is where all of the honesty in an organization exists. So it's a good opportunity and a good source for leads. So that could be a thing then, that in new salesperson hiring, we could add that to the training activity or something like that. So, Karen, sufficient example for you? All right, I will scroll back down there. Okay, cool. All right, there we go. All right, so that's in the human performance arena. So let's talk about how to do a job task analysis. And this is a model of the process models that I used to build when I interviewed performers. And the title of the interview was, Tell Me What You Do. And there was a kind of a script that I will show you that in a few minutes. But it's the components here that, as far as I'm concerned, if you can get the answers to all of these things, then you will have a fairly rigorous understanding of what somebody does for a living. Okay? So, the first thing I would do, after introductions and blah, 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 with the person, and back in the old days when I used to do this like serious hardcore stuff, right? And we used to do giant models and diagrams, and there were many levels, thick or deep, and we had modeling software and all of this stuff. So the way it would look in a room is I'm up in the front of the room, and there's as big a whiteboard as I can get. And there's a chair, and the chair is for whoever I'm going to interview. And then in the back of the room, there's a table, and there are two chairs there. And there are my two analysts down there. And that's the modeler and the note taker. And the note taker is the junior position. That's where we hired. And you cut your teeth as a note taker, and then you move up to a modeler. And then if you are enthusiastic and competent and sufficiently righteous, we will move you into the interviewer position, because that is the sacred spot, because that's where all the magic happens. So the conversation starts after introductions with me just making a list. And I say, over the course of the day, a week, a month, and a year, tell me what you do. And I just start writing things down. And what I want to get to is I want to get to a list of about 8 to 12. That's about the right level. And if somebody comes up with 25 different things, I'm going to start grouping them into a higher order task, which I can get to the decomposition later because they've just given me too much detail, and I can use that later. But I want to get to 8 to 12 on a page is about a maximum you want to get to, right? Anything less than 6 is insignificant. Anything more than 12, too much detail and you can't read it. So then a couple of general questions around that stuff. So going with this list of things now that somebody does, I'm going to say, okay, so what % of your time do you spend on each of these? Right? Because here's what I care about. I care about where people put their time. Because if there's a task on the list and it's something somebody does for an hour twice a year, I don't really care about that. Because I can have no impact, really. Okay? Unless it's, enter the codes and set off the nuclear device. But other than that, I don't really care because it's not significant. So, and there's going to be some kind of a Pareto distribution where a handful of the tasks are the ones where they spend their time, and the other ones are going to be secondary to that. So, and again, depending on the purpose of the project. So if I'm there to do training, I want to know everything, because if I'm going to be building training For the important stuff that gets done frequently, that's where the hard training is going to go. For anything that's complex, more training and rigorous documentation. And anything that doesn't happen too often and isn't all that hard, we're going to do light documentation on it, not worry about it. So it's about focus and prioritization. So then at some point, I start taking each one of these activities and laying it out like you see in front of you. And I'm going to say, okay, so in order to do this thing, what do you need to have in front of you? And I'll try to avoid the terms that I have here. The terms here are for display and for professional purposes. But I don't really ask, you know, what are the physical products and information/data that you require in order to execute your function? Because that's annoying and tedious. And then I sound like a consultant, and then they don't want to talk to me. I want to sound like a normal person. I want to use the language that I'm using with you guys right now, even though I can't hear you. But I close my eyes, and I imagine you're all sitting in front of me, and you're not even blinking because it's that fascinating what I have to say. So, and that's how I'd stay awake. So, thank you, David. So I say, so in order to do this, what do you have to get? What do you need? And they'll say, well, I need this thing, or I need this report, or I need the phone rings, or whatever they tell me. And I go, okay, so where does that come from? Who gives that to you? And you have to go ask for it, or does it magically appear? Or is it in a work queue, or something like that? So now I know what they start with, and I know where it comes from. And I say, so when you're done, how do you know you're done? What have you produced? Okay. Do you hang up the phone? Do you take any notes? Are you sending an email? Are you filling out a thing? Are you creating an object? What signifies the end of this task? And they're going to tell me. And it may be a physical product. It may be information or data. It might be a decision. Because essentially anybody who's in management has two outputs: direction and decisions. Other than that, management does nothing except obscure the truth between the people who do the work and the higher level management, because that's their job, obfuscators. But that's how they justify their existence. So now I know what they produce. And then I go, well, who gets this? Where does it go? Do you put it in your out basket? Like they do that anymore? Or do you send it somewhere? Does it get stored on SharePoint? Do you hand it to somebody? What happens to it? And they tell me where it goes. And now I know later I can go talk to wherever it goes, and I can say, so this thing you get from this person over here, is it what you want, the way you want it? And do you get it when you need it? And is it righteous? And then they're going to tell me, no, it's always late and it's always wrong. And I had to spend the first 2 hours of my day fixing it. And even if I was just there to do training, I've already found something that's totally awesome, and nobody wants to hear it, even though it would be a bigger improvement than the training, and I'm not going to get paid to do it. But I just do that anyway because that's what I do. And I'm going to do decent work, even if they don't want me to. I'm going to sneak it past them. So, all right. So now we got the whole across piece going. All right. So job title. So I want to know, okay, so are you the only one who does this? Who all does this work? Is it everybody who's a customer service rep? Is it everybody who's a loan processor? Is it everybody who's a salesperson? Is it everybody who's a recruiter? Who are all the people that do this? Because I want to know whether it's 5 people or 500 people. Because depending on what we're going to do, the approach, the solution, whatever it is we're going to come up with is going to be possibly different if we got 5 people or 500 people. And then I'm going to ask them, so when you're doing this, do you need anything besides a pen and a sheet of paper? Do you use a computer? Do you use a rotating lathe? Do you use a welder? What is the stuff that you need in order to get this work done? So, because if any kind of technology, like I need Microsoft Excel. Ah, bingo. Job training for new hires must include Microsoft Excel. And not generic Microsoft Excel, but how to take this piece of paper that they get and turn it into this spreadsheet. Because I want my training to be job-based, not theoretical and random and generic and pointless. So then people have to go out and figure out, how do I take what I learned and apply it? No, I want to train people how to do their jobs. I don't want to just make people generically smart so they're going to have to go back to work and figure stuff out. I don't want them figuring anything out. I want them walking out of my classroom with the level 2 evaluation, verifying that they were working when I gave them to you, and you broke them after I gave them to you. So that's a whole nother conversation. And then finally, up top, what we call controls is, are there any performance standards? Are there goals? Are there guidelines? When do you do this? Where do you do it? Are there any specific instructions that are written down somewhere that tell you how to do it? Why do you do this? Do you have any idea how you fit as a cog in the big machine? Do you understand your purpose? So all of that kind of stuff. And then once I have that for this, I can say, okay, so in order to do this, what's the first thing you do when you get this input that we talked about? And tell me the steps of this process. So now I'm breaking it down into its sub-steps, its components, if that's necessary. Okay? Because maybe they told me something that's really complex and I got to break it down. Or maybe they told me something that's pretty straightforward. I get this form, I don't even read it. I take my rubber stamp and I stamp it and I put it in my outbox. I go, all right, not hard. I hope you're not getting paid much. Maybe we should make you management. So that's what the picture looks like. Now, next slide, in words, is kind of mostly what I said here. All right, and then I just want to add a couple of things. So somewhere in there, it says, how long does it take and how often do you do it? Okay, so I'm kind of verifying maybe what I asked earlier, or I'm getting information for the first time. And they go, okay, so for this one, which out of the 8 things they told me they do, I picked number 4, and they go, so this one, I do this like 5 times a day and it takes 20 minutes. So that's 100 minutes. That's a good chunk of the day. So I want to understand that. Because if there's a bunch of people who do this, if there are dozens of people who spend 100 minutes a day doing something, it's significant. And if I can find a way to make it go faster, I could possibly be a hero. And if I can find a way to reduce the errors that occur, which again is talking to the customer that they hand it off to, right? So I go talk to the people who get this thing. I go, how often is this broken or not right or incomplete or late? And they tell me a lot. And I say, all right, that doesn't help me because a lot could be anything. What % of the time does it come to you defective? And if I get a number, I go back here and I know how many people are doing it. I know how long it takes. I know how often they're doing it. And I got an error rate from over here. So I know what % of the time failure is incurred. And I can find out how long does it take the people who get it downstream to fix it. So now I can apply a wage to that and I come up with the cost of an error. And if I can put some training or any other intervention whatsoever in place to reduce the error rate, that's money. Not realized until they either increase throughput without adding headcount or reduce headcount based on fixed throughput requirements, then it's real money, but it's potential money if the organization wants to do anything about it. All right. And so there's a whole bunch of other questions on here. And finally, after you've gone through all of this conversation and you've written everything down and it's on a whiteboard and you've used different color markers and 2 people are in the back of the room furiously typing everything this person says. They're a little bit tired. I'm totally jacked up and energized on this because I found something that nobody knew or has never been written down, and it's going to be communicated before. So, and thank you, David. No, I don't ask theoretical questions because I'm talking to working people here who come in, they go to work, they do their job generally, and they go home. And they appreciate whatever you want to call it, 8th grade English. So I save all of my expensive consulting words for management, especially prior to handing them an invoice. So that way they feel like they're getting their money's worth. So that's when I whip out cognitive dissonance and stuff like that. So the last one is now this person is totally dialed into what you're talking about. Their head is in the right place. And then you look at them as if, and it's not even as if, it's because you know that they're primed for this. And you go, so tell me, when you're doing this, what are the problems that you have? What makes it hard for you to do this quickly and do it well? And that's when frequently they just let loose with everything that's wrong, which is what you want to know, especially if you have the broader charge of being a performance consultant as opposed to the narrow charge of create training for new hires. Okay? So this is really where the magic happens. And, you know, because you've been in the room, you've been in there for a while, you've established rapport, you're getting at the guts of what this person does every day. They see it in a picture and it all makes sense to them now. And they go, oh my God, this is what I do. And they're amazed because you got that out of them. And they're just so ready to tell you everything. So that's why it's at the end. You don't ever start with that. You always end with that at the end of this process or at the end of when you're gathering everything you're going to gather. So those are the interview questions to get the job task documentation down as the model or as the words that you're going to use. Then there's some other information you can gather around this, which, you know, either going into it or around while you're doing it or after you've got the basics from individual performers, is finding out how many people do this and how long does it take on average and how frequently and what exists to help people to do this well, either in standard situations or when something comes in that's a little bit weird or uncommon or just not normal. And what's the definition of doing it right? Does that even exist? Because there's a lot of work environments where there's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff out there, and nowhere does it say this is the standard. Right? Please give me a yes or no back in the chat box. Do any of you have any experience with call centers? All right, Rebecca does. Melody, a little bit. From back when I was middle-aged. Karen, you've worked at one, okay? All right, Rebecca worked at a credit card company. Okay, so illustratively, all right, help desk, calling alumni. Okay, cool. So you guys have some background. So you know that at a call center, right? A decent call center has massive amounts of numbers. They know how many times an agent or a customer service rep or whatever you want to call them, how many calls they received, how long the calls went, whether the calls were resolved on the first call resolution, and whether or not calls had to be escalated to get resolved. And there are standards, and there may be variable pay, and there may be bonuses. And it's all very clear in the call center environment, at least in big time serious call centers, with numbers up on the board and agents able to see their individual performance for the shift and all of that stuff. And typically there's a good deal of performance support around them, if not actual scripting of what to say that has branching and pathing depending on the responses from the customers. So it's a high performance support environment. But think about everywhere else you've ever worked or been exposed to where none of that was there. There was no definition of good performance. If I'm a business analyst and I gather requirements for software, what's the standard? How fast should I do that? What's the definition of doing it without error? And the degree to that's not in place is the degree to which you can't tell somebody you're not doing a good job. Because they're like, okay, so what's the standard and how are you measuring me? Well, I don't like you. That's the standard. And I measure you subjectively. So I'm going to start writing you up because I'm going to hire my cousin. So sorry, that was tangential, but you were warned. So anyway, so good things to know about an environment, because all the training in the world is not going to overcome a bad environment if everything else is wrong about it. So then there's some stuff you can go get from HR if they're willing to share it with you, okay? Particularly the compensation and the variable compensation for any of the jobs that you're doing analysis against, so you understand what are the extrinsic rewards associated with performance, especially around variable compensation. And if you're going to suggest that some intervention can reduce the cycle time of a process from an average of 58 minutes to 17 minutes, and you know what people get paid, you can calculate the potential savings of implementing your recommendations. And then over on the technology side, some general understandings that you can get about that. Because I can't tell you how many organizations I've been in where they just spent a bunch of money, they gave people a new system, and they trained everybody, and the new people get through with it, and they're out there doing their work like they used to do, except now the system is new, and they go, slower than I used to be, or I have to keystroke twice as much, and it's killing me. And they made a whole mess on the design of this thing. So things to know about technology. All right, Greg, in the JTA process, do you have people who try to tell you, I'm a professional, I'm not a factory worker? Yes, I do. And I've had people who tell me that what they do is art. And I've said, so I can just tell you it sucks and you really don't have an argument for me, do you? Because art is subjective. And I got a whole bunch of smart ass answers I can throw at that. But actually working with the creative people in that financial company in Baltimore, we built, because I came at them with empathy and a scheme, because there were 3 different teams. They were all marketing teams, and one did internet marketing, and one did print and media, and the other one did outbound phone marketing. And marketing like that has 2 objectives. Objective 1 is to get responses, and objective 2 is to get either new accounts or additional accounts. So it was very measurable. And I talked to him and I said, you know, if we could come up with a way to kind of describe in some measurable sense what you guys do, we could probably put something in place and we could figure out which team was the best around here. And there's always a couple of people who got all excited about that because they thought they were good compared to the other people. And then there's always a couple of people who are afraid to do that because they think they're not good. compared to other people, and they don't want it exposed. So, but you find the people who were motivated and said, all right, let's figure this out. And I came up with a way. It was kind of qualitative, but we could still reduce it to a handful of questions and put it on a Likert scale around productivity and quality of work in a creative department. So that was kind of fun. So it can be done. I mean, a professional, take a brain surgeon, right? Well, that's pretty measurable. 0 or 1. Patient's dead, patient not dead. Not hard to measure the results of that. So, all right. Now, specifically for training, same model, and just yes or no. How many folks on the call today are familiar with the phrase performance conditions criteria? And if you are, can you tell me the author who pretty much coined that as one of the standards underneath ATD? All right, Greg, stop answering the questions, because you know all of my questions. I don't have any that really that I can ask this audience that you haven't heard. Okay, so performance conditions criteria. That is the seminal work by, Ganya, you're in the ballpark, Karen. You're in the right section of the library. So Robert Mager is known as the father of learning objectives or training objectives. And his big deal is the format is performance conditions criteria. That's how you write your training objectives. And it's only until you have them until you have them, you cannot design your training, because you don't know what you're designing to. So performance is, and you've seen this language before, okay? Given raw materials and a mechanical tool, the learner will be able to create an object to the following standards within this time frame. Okay, so given an input, the learner will be able to execute a task, produce the output per standards. Generically, that's what it looks like. When you have all of this information here, the performance is execute the task and produce your outputs. The conditions are given the inputs and given the technology or the tools that you have to execute the work. And the conditions are to whatever's up here in the controls area. That should be some defined standard of here's the rubric against which we will evaluate the output, and we expect you to produce an average of 3 of them an hour, 1 a day, 2 a month, whatever that is. Okay, so that's where your training objectives come from when you're using this type of a format. They're built for you. And look at that. It's on the nose, but I'm happy to hang out for as long as you guys want to hang out. So, did I have a final slide? No. So that's the nuts of the presentation today. And actually, let me rip over to your questions and see if I can make some sense out of this stuff. So I can't move that, can I? I guess I can put it over here a little bit. and I can shrink this a little bit. So, okay. First questions came from Karen. Karen, can you hear me? Okay, not talking. Fair enough. Can you do a job task without considering competencies? Absolutely.
Karen,
it depends on the purpose. Yeah, I can see her message here.
Oops, sorry.
And she doesn't have a mic. So sure, you don't have to do competencies. I mean, if that's not within the scope of the purpose of what you're doing, then I would just lay off of it. Because ultimately, it's about the job tasks, right? You might be curious as to what are the underlying knowledge and skill sets that make for a competent performer, but not necessary if it's not required for the work. Ad hoc tasks could be formed by any work considered at all. Well, again, it's why am I doing the job task analysis? What problem have I been asked to solve? And what do I need to know in my job task analysis in order to solve that problem? So, and it may very well be, for your example, annual meeting, okay? Well, who does that? Somebody. And should we have documentation around here in case that person isn't here a year from now? So it's for tasks in particular that are complex and which occur infrequently that good documentation should be on hand, because whoever did it last may not be here or may have forgotten how they did it. So sure. A thorough job task analysis. When I was doing this for car salespeople at dealerships, it took me roughly 2 days to get through a salesperson. One, because they won't stop talking, which was fine. But two, even though it's pretty straightforward, there was a lot of intricacy underneath it. Sometimes it took a little while for them to tell me the real truth. Like anytime a salesperson in a car dealership says, because they're struggling to get you to buy that car right now for that price, and says, let me get my manager, probably not the manager. It's just one of the salespeople sitting in the back, and they go back there and they go, dude, customer's squirreling out on me. I need you to go sales manager. And the person walks out like they're real important, and they may shuffle you off to an office where they can pretend to really be wheeling and dealing and violating store policy. And then they get up and they'll close the door, and they do what's referred to in the industry as a whisper close, so that no one in the rest of the shop can hear them. And they'll say in a low voice, I'm going to close the door now so we can have like a private conversation, because I think you're so awesome. I'm going to give you a deal that I'm probably going to get in trouble for. And then they close the deal, and it's an opera. The whole thing is a staged opera to get you to buy that car. So it takes a while to get into that stuff. So, but for most jobs, a couple days. It also depends on the level of detail. When I was working at the data center that supports the 12 members of the Federal Reserve banking system, we were talking to senior technical analysts. The first guy I ever did this for, his name was Charlie, and he worked in Richmond at the data center. And Charlie was a retired IBM technical guy. And his job was, when something went wrong, get Charlie in here to fix the machine. So it was super complex, and he had 30 years of experience on this stuff. And he was one of those guys where, you know, he would listen to the machine to figure out what was wrong with it and stuff like that. And there's a certain level where you just can't model that, right? Because it's just knowledge and expertise from years and years and years. But our task was to get the first 3 to 4 diagnostic steps. so that we could take the folks who were sitting in the room staring at the monitors all the time and getting paid low money to turn them essentially into the EMTs of the data center, so they could do the first 3 steps, so that by the time Charlie got there, he didn't have to do that. They could tell him, we did this, we did this, we did this, here's what it is, and he'd say, okay, and he could take off on step number 4. So it saved a lot of time. But for everything that I did with Charlie over the course, I probably spent over a week, just me and him in a room, banging that out. So it does vary. Given the time, I'm going to burn through here, and let's see some next questions, and I'll just open things up. Look at that. Thank you, Rhonda, for noting that it's an ideal question. I've not had a question labeled ideal, I don't think, ever, so I'm going to save this. New position, job description. Yeah, you're in a situation where the potential to be taken advantage of is high, and it's a matter of how you want to play that. It's like, you want to be the everything? Be careful, because you may become the everything and get no salary increase for that. Or maybe you want to play it, it's okay, I'll be the everything as long as I think I can negotiate commensurate compensation increase to go with that. So that's my quick take right there. Each job is different, moving parts. How important for the manager to monitor and review these changing tasks? I'm gonna say that depends on the job, because and there's some questions, I'll come back to that. So depending on the job, okay, some jobs are pretty straightforward. You're an agent in a call center. You have the same set of tasks, and it's just repeated infinitely. Whereas if you're an organizational change analyst at a consulting company or some other place, that job may change all the time. To what degree do you need to, as a manager, know everything that every one of your people is doing? That's situational. So in times, I have had teams reporting to me, either in a regular environment or in a project environment, where every single one of them I felt was professional and trustworthy and had good judgment and was competent and all of that stuff. So there were times I had no idea what anybody was doing. I was off setting up the next thing, and they were executing assigned work. And I trusted them because I knew that if anything was even starting to smell weird, that they would let me know about it. And that's the relationship we had. Very rarely have I been in a situation where I had people reporting to me and I didn't trust them. So I didn't have to be on top of everything. I didn't have to micromanage anything. So now trainees, that's a different thing. Trainees, you got to be on top of them to make sure that nothing bad happens to them, and that they're learning to do the right things and they're learning it in the right way. Buy-in from employees or management. If nobody cares what you're doing, then get out as quickly as you can. So as far as the metrics, everything we've talked about, you have an activity and you have an output. You can measure the cycle time of the activity, you can measure the volume of output, and you should be able to come up with some measure of the quality of the output. And those can translate, because once you have time and you have compensation, now you know what it costs, and you can get to activity-based costing. And you can take that any way you need to. Let me go back up here. And okay, so Karen, tell me again when you say in the context of determining best performers, one salesperson times a total number or a sample. So when you have a sales organizations are typically measured very well, again, because they're paid on some type of a compensation system or a variable compensation system, commissions. So it's known who sold how many of what. And that may or may not be in their job description, but it's certainly going to be in their compensation plan, which every salesperson has memorized and probably has a spreadsheet that they're playing around with every day or a couple times a week to see what is my money looking like. So in the car business, the salespeople there, as opposed to probably anyone on this call or anybody that you know, at the end of the week when they get a paycheck, they all go in the back room, open up the envelope, whip out the paycheck, and everybody looks at everybody else and says, how did you do? And they share their paychecks, which doesn't happen in the rest of the world, in America anyway, because pay is a secret. And I have a whole nother conversation about management versus labor that I'm not going into right now. Would you suggest as a new manager coming into a company, a job task analysis should be done on the people you have reporting to you? Read the job descriptions. You may have gathered my opinion that I don't believe job descriptions as far as I can make a paper airplane and throw them across the room. So as a new manager coming into a place, I would first talk to my boss and have a clear understanding, probably before I agreed to take the job, of how are you going to measure my performance? How are you going to know whether or not I'm doing a good job? How is this department evaluated as a group? And start with that. And then talk to the individuals. And, you know, a modified script here, but what do you do? And how do you know you're doing it well? And tell me a little bit about yourself. What's your background? You know, get their resumes, read them, and have some questions and a dialogue. So that's how I'd go at it being a new manager. Okay, cool. So let's see where did there it is. Insurance companies. My first real white-collar job was in the actuarial department of a property and casualty insurance company. So job analysis would be very helpful with regard to workers' compensation claims. I probably don't have the expertise that you do, but my understanding is, I don't care what you were doing at work, if you got hurt at work, you're entitled to workers' comp. Now, if you were doing something you weren't supposed to be doing, and it's been communicated to you, and you've signed the acknowledgement form that I'm not supposed to drink at work, I'm not supposed to operate machinery unless I'm licensed, I'm supposed to wear a hard hat in a construction area, yada, yada, yada. But that's more in the policy arena as opposed to the job task arena. And if somebody sent the employee into a construction area and said, I don't care if you don't have your helmet, get in there, you're probably still paying the claim, or you've got another claim against the firm itself in terms of the management behavior. Equity and desk audits and instructional desire. From a training assignment, it depends. You know, anytime anybody asks me to do training, unless it's new hire training or unless it's what I call system conversion training, because we're going from old system to new system. If somebody says, hey, my department is broken, fix it with training, I'm going to dig into, how do you know it's broken? I want a good problem definition from you, if I can get away with it, right? So I want a statement of omission or commission. Tell me what's not happening that's supposed to, Tell me what is happening that's not supposed to be happening. And from a performance consulting standpoint, I'm going to start with, and Greg will hear this as the 7 buckets of human performance. First and foremost, is performance, expected performance, documented? And has it been communicated? And is it measured? And is good performance rewarded? And is bad performance punished? Because if that's not in place, all the training in the world is not going to defeat the reinforcement system or the absence of communicated definition. So you want me to fix an existing problem? I need to know what the problem is, and I want to understand the root cause. Because very, very often, the root cause to a performance problem in the workplace is not the absence of skill. And the only problem that training solves, actually it solves 2. One is it remediates an absence of required skill. The other is it generates records for compliance purposes. Those are the 2 problems that training solves. Training solves no other problems. Okay, so I'm good on the chat board. And that question there. And how much time we talked about. Front-end analysis, performance review, other duties that assigned. You know, again, I take a job description for what it's worth, which is nothing. So hopefully during performance reviews, people are evaluated on what they did. And if that's not in the job description, I'm not going to walk over to HR and say, hey, knuckleheads, fix the job descriptions. Because I don't like HR departments. I've never been exposed to an HR department that impressed me. If you want, I'll tell you how I really feel. Dive into suspected performance problems. It depends. So if I'm hired, I have been hired on occasion and given the license to go in that department and just do your thing and give me some recommendations. That is something you work all your life to have that relationship with a client. So it's rare. But if you get the chance, it's fun as hell. HR doesn't always do it. No, HR, I'm not going to talk about HR anymore because I want to enjoy my evening. Current job, and there we go. Okay, so 7:51, Greg, I've exceeded quota. I will ask now, are there any additional questions that anybody has? And by the way, for the folks that were kind enough to attend the session tonight, Greg has my email address. I authorize him to share it with you. And if any of you would like to continue the dialogue on a going forward basis, I'm happy to do so. So, any other questions, comments?
Folks, as you can see,
you're welcome, Greg.
Mick's not shy. He's speaks his mind, and he has a lot of good experience. And I say this in a good way. You can't really insult Mick because he, you know, I say this in a good way. He's from Jersey. He's dealt with a lot of stuff.
Because I'm from Jersey, and on Monday in Atlanta, where I am right now, within walking distance from my condo, I'm going to see Dave Chappelle and Jon Stewart together doing some kind of a show. I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
But as I explained to somebody the other day, Jon Stewart is actually metaphysically my younger brother. We share sensibilities about so many things, as well as vocabulary, including that crap they have in Chicago is not pizza. It's just not. So stop it. Just stop it.
I think you could have a radio show. I'm laughing.
I know, but it would. But I have to base it off of business. You know, training and performance consulting. Nobody cares about that. like there's like 800 people in America who care about this, right?
Wow.
So if I could make any money, I would do it. I would do a podcast if I could make money at it. But how do you do that? I have no idea. I would be the Alex Jones of performance consulting.
Yeah, I don't see how you make money with podcasts, not from where I sit, but
No. But the Alex Jones reference was pretty cool, right?
see, you are Jon Stewart.
Especially because he's in. Yes, exactly. Because he's in the news right now. That sunglass wearing charlatan.
So, folks, questions for Mick.
Yes, Karen. All pizza around the New York, New Jersey area is correct and righteous pizza. Even in Atlanta, there's a small chain down here called Fellini's that's acceptable. Ugh, deep dish. It's not. It's pizza soup in a crust bowl.
So, Mick, do you ever have people that hire you to just give them data to confirm a decision they've already made or are thinking of making?
Not up front, but it's been the case.
Okay. So my guess is you could probably smell through that pretty quickly.
Yeah, but I'm getting paid, right? So
right.
It's how much do I have a soul versus how much does my kid's tuition gonna cost me? How much is it gonna cost me?
I feel like you could do consulting for teaching people how to go into an interview and come out successful.
My advice on how to do a job interview. So a couple of points. First is go look for a job when you don't need one. That way you can tell them to get lost, or you can put a stupid demand on the table. And if they say no, you go, all right, whatever. So that's the first thing. It's just like buying a car. Do not ever wait if you can avoid it. Do not ever, arrive at a car dealership in an Uber and say, I need to buy a car right now. Because they just start laughing. And it's the same thing with jobs. The best time to look for a job is when you don't need one. So you keep your interview practice fresh, and you get to ask for actual market rates. And if they want to hire you, great. And if they don't, whatever. So, but the second part of it is, when you do the interview, you have to be interviewing them. It's got to go both ways. It's like, all right, so how much do I want to work for you? Not, you can't come off like a jerk about it. But, it's a combination of I don't care and I'm interviewing you. Because if you don't meet my standards, I almost don't care what you offer me. Because I don't have to work for you. I'll go work somewhere else because I got my act together. And I'm not afraid of you.
Well, you're in pretty good negotiating position financially, right? Because if you're not desperate for a job, you can, like you said, always walk away from it.
Absolutely. And, it's like car shopping. You have a car and you want to get rid of it in the next 6 months, fine, start shopping. And the general wisdom on that is don't tell them you have a trade in until you're done with the deal. And you go, oh, yeah, how much for this trade? So, but that stuff's out there on the internet, how to buy a car. Yeah, Melody, there you go. So do you want to work for an idiot? You say, okay, well, how about you hire me and I'll do nothing and you pay me. And when you can think of what you want me to do, then let's consider that. We'll have a conversation. How would that work?
Absolutely. There were 3 directors and none of them could tell me what they wanted this person to do.
Then, a fun question would be, how are you going to decide who you want to hire? what evaluation criteria will you be applying?
Right. All they could tell me was tired and
yeah. Yeah. Or you step back and you go, before you make a bad decision, you should hire me as a consultant to analyze your work environment. I will develop for you through a modified, customized for your particular needs, an extensive job task analysis, which I will then reframe as a job description, which your HR department will be able to then go out and do a compensation analysis so they can figure out what's market value. And I will then produce for you the advertisement that you need to post on the internet. And I will develop for you a series of interview questions against a competency model, as well as a rubric for scoring those questions. And you will hire, at least with dramatically improved likelihood, a successful candidate. What would that be worth to you?
That would have been a perfect response.
All right, well, save it for next time.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, Mick.
Yes, sir.
Since you mentioned interviews, since we all deal with this at some point, how do you, I'm curious, how do you approach your strategy for the question, Mr. Magill, what kind of compensation are you looking for in this position?
All right. Well, hopefully I have some sense market-wise where it is.
Okay.
Okay. And so if I don't need this job, then ideally somewhere in my understood range is a reasonable increase for me. So, but I also try to go at it a little loose, right? Because it's a negotiation. And, the general rule that any of us who took the negotiation class by the mysteriously disappeared John Bulow, is he still alive, Greg? Any idea?
I hear from him rarely, occasionally. He still teaches for us, but I don't hear a lot from him socially.
All right, fabulous. So the first one who puts a number on the table loses. Okay. So my first response would be, well, I assume you have a range in mind, otherwise you wouldn't have had approval to post the job. So I'm aware of the general range for this, and that's your offer to make. But my overarching concern is really total compensation, which is the full package between the actual base salary, if that's what it is, the bonus structure, the achievability of the bonus structure, the variability of the bonus structure, the degree it's tied to my performance versus company performance, and vacation, healthcare, and all the rest of it. I'm a total package guy.
Okay, fair enough.
And then I would just stop. So then I would stop talking, right? And let the silence become uncomfortable. Because as a person, whether it's job task, anytime you're asking questions and having a dialogue, never, ever, ever be afraid of the silence. It can be your friend, because people don't like the silence. So as opposed to me doing a one-way presentation tonight, pretty much, okay, you want the other person to be providing you with information. So there are times when they'll answer a question and you're not happy with the answer because you think it's short. So just dwell in the silence, be comfortable in the silence, and wait for them to continue talking. So it's another tool. Silence is a tool for you to use.
I like that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Karen, your mother was manipulative.
Any other questions for
Okay.
Mick?